Well, welcome back to Touring History, where we turn calendars into entertainment and pretend we understand the complexities of human civilization. I certainly don't. I'm Dave.
And I'm Complex Lane. And before we dive into what might be one of the most historically significant dates we've ever covered, let's talk about something that's been consistently significant since 1952.
Ooh,
Randy's Donuts.
excellent. Oh, you're going straight for the donuts today. I respect that, Lane.
Dave, when you're about to talk about Juneteenth, the Rosenbergs, and the first Father's Day all in one episode, you need proper fuel, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
And Randy's Donuts has been fueling Los Angeles with perfection for over 70 years.
The giant donut sign isn't just a landmark, it's a promise that inside you'll find donuts that make you question every other bakery decision you've ever made.
I was there yesterday, actually, and got
Really?
one of their chocolate old fashioned donuts. I like those, and I also like the cream filled chocolate Long John. You
Mmm.
can't beat it. It's like they took everything good about chocolate and everything good about donuts and just combined them into something that shouldn't be illegal, Dave.
Well, it's a chocolate fantasy going on there of yours. That's the Randy's difference right there. They don't just make donuts, they make experiences. Classic glazed, specially filled donuts, bear claws, that are basically breakfast pastries, having an identity crisis in the best possible way.
That's right. Check them out at randysdonuts.com because if you're going to learn about history, you might as well do it with optimal blood sugar levels. Let's
And
go.
oh, yes, and a cup of joe in the other hand. And speaking of history, today is June 19th, which means we're talking about Juneteenth, the day that actually ended slavery in America, even though most people didn't know it happened.
Plus, we've got executions, naval battles, civil rights victories, and somehow the first Father's Day gets squeezed in there too.
Yeah, we're always last, Lane. I know what that's like. Oh, and the day that advertising became legally required to tell the truth. Ooh, truth in
Hmm.
advertising. You know, there's the McCann Erickson logo that says truth well told. And at the end, it says lies well sold. No, I'm kidding about that, which honestly feels like it should have been obvious. But here we are.
Here we are. And before we get into the heavy stuff, let's talk about who was born on this day because it's a fascinating mix of people today.
Well, let's start out with Jose Rizal, born on June 19th, 1861. Filipino nationalist, writer, and basically the guy who helped inspire the Philippine independence movement. That's
Yeah,
right.
Rizal is one of those historical figures who was way ahead of his time. He was writing novels that criticized Spanish colonial rule when that was a death sentence, basically,
Yeah.
which, spoiler alert, it
Hmm?
eventually was for him, unfortunately.
Oh, well, poor Rizal. And then we have the man who wrote Noili Mi Tangere, which translates to Touch Me Not. Ooh, I should listen to that more closely. And it was such effective anti colonial literature that the Spanish authorities banned it immediately.
Yeah. And then we have Aung San Suu Kyi,
Hmm.
born in 1945, Nobel Peace Prize winner who spent years under house arrest for opposing Myanmar's military government.
Why haven't we heard more about that person? Suu Kyi's story is complicated, though. She was this incredible symbol of democratic resistance, and then she actually got power, and things got messy.
Right. The Rohingya crisis really complicated her legacy. It's a reminder that heroes can be complicated and liberation movements don't always lead to the outcomes you expect.
That's right. You never know what's going to happen when you're let out of prison. On a much lighter note, we've got Blair Underwood turning 61, who basically defined smooth for an entire generation of TV watchers.
Blair Underwood in LA Law was peak 1980s television sophistication. The man made being a lawyer look glamorous, which is quite an achievement.
Yes, he went to high school with me. And then we jump to the modern era KSI, who's 32, YouTuber, boxer, musician, basically the definition of internet celebrity entrepreneurship.
KSI represents this whole generation of people who built media empires out of literally nothing but personality and internet access. It's kind of amazing when you think about it. And think of our personalities and our internet access, Dave. We're going to be huge.
Oh, ex, exponential, Lane, exponential. Plus, Zoe Saldana, who's 47, and basically has been in every major sci fi franchise in the last 15 years: Star Trek, Avatar, Guardians of the Galaxy. She's the queen of fictional universes. She's
She's
everywhere.
got this ability to bring emotional depth to characters who are often blue or green or from other planets or both. That's very specific skill set.
Yes, the only thing blue or green that comes out of me is after a night of heavy drinking. So, all right, let's start with the big one. June 19th, 1865. Union General Gordon Granger arrives in Galveston, Texas, and issues General Order Number 3, which finally enforced the Emancipation Proclamation in Texas.
This is Juneteenth, and it's wild that it took until 2021 for this to become a federal holiday because this is literally the day slavery actually ended in America.
Yeah, it takes us some time in certain areas. What blows my mind is that the Emancipation Proclamation was issued in 1863, but it took 2.5 years for the news to reach, or more accurately, be enforced in Texas.
Huh. Can't
Yeah,
imagine Texas dragging their heels on such things. Well, it's not like enslaved people in Texas didn't know about the proclamation. Their enslavers knew about it too. They just ignored it because who was going to stop them?
yeah, come on. This is Texas. You're not going to tell us what to do anything, all right? Right. Well, until Union troops actually showed up with the authority to enforce it. Did take them 2 years, though. And when Granger read that order, it affected about 250,000 enslaved people in Texas.
You know what gets me? The order
What?
didn't just say you're free. It told the formerly enslaved people that they had to work for wages now, and it told their former enslavers that they couldn't just keep treating them like property.
Ooh, that must have been a tough moment. You're free. And by the way, you enslavers, you got to pay them. It's such a foundational moment in American history. And yet it took until I was an adult for most Americans to really learn about it.
The fact that we're just now making Juneteenth the proper national holiday is a little embarrassing.
True.
This should have been as big as the 4th of July from day one.
Yeah. Well, and celebrations that started that day in Texas with food, music, and family gatherings, those traditions have been passed down for 160 years. That's incredible cultural resilience.
It is, Dave. And now moving on to something
Executions.
much darker. June 19th, 1953, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were executed for espionage.
That's right. Spying communists. That's what they were accused of. This case is still controversial today. The Rosenbergs were convicted of passing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union, but there are serious questions about whether they actually did it and whether the punishment fit the crime.
What makes this case so haunting is that they left behind two young children. Whether you think they were guilty or innocent, watching parents get executed when their kids are 10 and 6 years old is brutal.
Yeah, not our finest hour. The evidence against Julius was stronger than against Ethel, but they were both sentenced to death. And this was happening during the height of the Red Scare, when being accused of communist sympathies could destroy your life.
What's really disturbing is that Ethel might have been used as leverage to get Julius to confess. The
Oh,
government may have been hoping that threatening his wife would make him talk.
and it didn't work. Julius maintained his innocence until the end, and they both went to the electric chair. What a great husband, huh?
Hmm. It's
Hmm.
one of those cases where even if you think they were guilty, the death penalty seems excessive, especially for Ethel, where the evidence was much weaker.
Yeah, I wonder what their marriage was really like. I mean, all he had to say was, "Oh, I did it. Let her go. She had nothing to do with it." But no, he didn't. The
Hmm.
whole thing reflects the paranoia of the era. The atomic bomb was this terrifying new reality, duck and cover, and the idea that Americans might be giving those secrets to the Soviets drove people absolutely crazy. It's like Taylor Swift tickets. Not really.
Nothing's as coveted as the Taylor Swift
It's
tickets.
true.
Atomic Secrets be damned. I need those Taylor Swift
Yeah,
tickets.
I got them. Well, shifting to World War II, June 19th, 1944, marks the beginning of the Battle of the Philippine Sea, which included, we're back to the Philippines, which included what pilots called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot.
That name is so American. We shot down so many enemy planes, it was like hunting turkeys.
Ha! The numbers are insane. The Japanese lost something like 400 aircraft in one day, which is a whole hell of a lot, while the Americans lost maybe 29. Who was the better pilot? I don't know. It was a complete slaughter in the air.
This was the largest carrier battle in history. 15 American carriers against 9 Japanese characters. Characters? No, carriers with over 13 over 1,300 aircraft involved. So
Well, those
that's
carriers
a
were
lot going on in
characters,
the
though.
sky. That's
Anyway,
true.
what's fascinating is that this battle effectively ended Japan's ability to conduct major carrier operations for the rest of the war. They lost so many experienced pilots that they never really recovered.
The Japanese called their pilots the flowers of the Navy, and in one day, most of those flowers got shot down by American pilots who had been training in safety, while the Japanese were burning through their experienced airmen in earlier battles.
Yes, you could say those flowers are plucked away. It's a perfect
Oof.
example of how attrition warfare works. The Americans could replace their losses, planes, pilots, everything, and the Japanese couldn't.
Plus, American pilots who got shot down over the Pacific often got rescued. Japanese pilots who went down were usually just gone. That makes a huge difference in maintaining an experienced Air Force.
Yes, we didn't think our pilots should be considered shark bait. But the Japanese did. The battle basically secured American control of the Central Pacific and opened the way for the invasion of the Philippines. It was a turning point that made Japan's defeat inevitable.
Well, moving on to 1964,
Mhm.
June 19th, 1964, the US Senate approves the Civil Rights Act after one of the longest filibusters in history.
Yeah, that wasn't an easy one to get past. 83 days. 83 days of serving senators trying to talk the bill to death. I say, Beauregard, we are never going to let it do anything but die.
Yeah, Strom Thurmond spoke over 24 hours straight at one point, which was recently broken by Cory Booker in the US Senate. Um, I don't think Cory Booker was protesting civil rights. He was probably on the other side. Um, yeah, I can barely talk for 24 minutes getting one of these recordings done without losing my voice. So I don't know how they did it.
Yes, well, what's interesting about Strom Thurmond and his opposition to the Civil Rights Bill is that he actually fathered a child by his black maid. And nobody really knew about it until years later. So, what's
Hmm.
amazing, in addition to that story, is that this was exactly 99 years after Juneteenth. Like, it took a century after slavery ended for America to actually try to enforce civil rights.
The filibuster was led by a group of 18 Southern Democrats who called themselves the Southern Bloc, and they threw everything they had at stopping this bill.
Yes, the Dixiecrats, but they couldn't stop it forever. The bill passed 73 to 27, and it was this massive victory for the civil rights movement. About time!
What I love is that the civil rights leaders knew this was happening and were basically glued to their televisions and radios waiting for the vote.
And when it passed, you had celebrations breaking out in churches and community centers all across the country. People knew this was the moment that was going to change everything.
Well, change the law anyway.
True.
Changing hearts and minds would take a lot longer.
Yes, but you've got to start somewhere, and making discrimination illegal was a pretty good place to start. So,
Always.
first on to us, Lane.
Yeah. Oh, us cool dads out
1910,
there.
Father's Day. It was a much lighter development. June 19th, 1910, celebrated Father's Day in Spokane, Washington.
This was all because of Sonora Smart Dodd, whose father raised 6 children by himself after his wife died in childbirth.
So she was smart. That's why she had that middle name. She's listening to a Mother's Day sermon and thinking, wait, what about the dads? My dad was amazing. And she just decided to create a holiday. You go, Sonora.
Yeah, I love that she picked June because it was her father's birth month. Like this wasn't some marketing committee decision. It was just a daughter who wanted to honor her dad.
Yeah, and we get better weather than mom. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
although it took until 1972 for Father's Day to become an official federal holiday, I didn't know that. Mother's Day got federal recognition in 1914, so dads had to wait almost 60 years.
That seems about right, honestly. Mothers
Yeah,
organize everything, fathers show up and grill things.
that's right. Hey, grilling is important, Lane. Someone has to be in charge of meat and fire.
That's true. What's funny is that early Father's Day was much more serious than it is now. People gave speeches about fatherhood and civic responsibility. Now it's basically here's a tie and let dad watch sports for a little bit.
Yeah, back then it was all speeches about, now this here sperm is something very important. No, I'm not complaining about evolution. Sometimes simple is better.
Now we're getting into advertising history. Let's move on to June 19th, 1876. Move on, move back, whatever. It's June
Yeah.
19th. And it marks when Bass Red Triangle became the UK's first registered trademark.
Oh, is that the beer? A
Yeah, I
triangle.
think so. I think
They
so.
trademarked a triangle. How'd they do that? And it worked.
Well, it was specifically a red triangle, and it was for Bass Ale, which was hugely popular at the time.
Ah, and what I love about this is that it shows how branding was becoming a thing in the 1870s. Companies were realizing that symbols and logos could be valuable property.
And Bass knew what they were doing. They camped out at the trademark office to make sure they got the first registration. They understood that being first mattered.
That's right, the red triangle became so iconic that it appeared in famous paintings. Manet put it in one of his works, and when your beer logo ends up in fresh impressionist art, you've made it.
It's wild to think about how this simple geometric shape became one of the most recognizable symbols in the world. Just a red triangle, but everyone knew exactly what it meant.
Well, not everybody, Lane. I never heard of that story. And it's still in use today, 149 years later, and Bass still uses that red triangle. That's an incredible brand consistency. Maybe they should be on our show.
Let's have them on, shall we?
Yeah,
I'll send them an invite today. Let's see
please
when
do.
they show up.
Yes.
Though, let's be honest, most people today probably don't even realize they're looking at the world's first registered trademark when they see that red triangle. But when they join the podcast, we'll spend some time diving further into that red triangle.
Yes. June 19th, 1938, Congress passes the Wheeler-Lee Act, which made false advertising illegal. Oh, what a pity.
Wait, false advertising was legal before
Oh,
1938?
yeah.
That explains
This'll
so much.
cure anything. Scabies, rhinoceros nose, anything.
Yeah, it explains so much about early 20th century medicine.
Yeah. This tonic will cure your consumption, grow your hair back, and make you irresistible to the opposite sex. No problem, as long as you didn't actually poison anybody.
The Wheeler-Lee Act was specifically targeting patent medicines and health products because people were making wild claims about curing diseases with basically sugar water and alcohol.
Yes, hence the term snake oil. Before this, the Federal Trade Commission could only go after false advertising if it hurt competitors. They couldn't do anything just because it hurt consumers. You should have read the directions.
Yeah, it's kind of insane when you think about it. Sorry, Mrs. Johnson, we know that hair tonic gave you a rash, but the company's competitors aren't complaining, so our hands are tied.
Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, the new law said that advertising had to be truthful and couldn't be misleading, which seems like it should have been obvious, but apparently it needed to be written down.
What's funny is that this law is still the foundation of advertising regulation today. Every time you see results not typical or individual results may vary, that's Wheeler Lee at work.
Although, let's be real, advertisers immediately started finding creative ways around the new rules, as they always do. The spirit of patent medicine salesman lives on in modern marketing.
And it's time to do some modern marketing. Speaking of honest advertising, let's talk about Randy's Donuts, which
Yes,
has
please
been
do.
delivering exactly what they promised since 1952.
Oh, no false claims here, Lane. When Randy says they make incredible donuts, they mean it. And when they say they've got that giant iconic donut sign, you can literally see it from space. Well, maybe not space, but definitely from the freeway.
I love that Randy's doesn't need to oversell anything. The donuts speak for themselves. Classic glazed perfection, creative specialty flavors, and that old school bakery quality that you just can't fake.
Yes, plus they're open 24 hours, which means
Hmm.
whether you're an early bird looking for breakfast or a night owl satisfying a midnight craving, Randy's got you covered.
And unlike those questionable patent medicines from before 1938, Randy's ingredients are exactly what you'd expect: flour, sugar, and a whole lot of expertise that's been perfected over 7 decades.
Check them out at randysdonuts.com because when we say they're good, damn it, we mean it. No Wheeler Lee Act violations here.
Just honest donuts for honest people. Now back to our historical journey. Let's go, Dave.
That's right, way back to 1306, we have the Battle of Methven, where Robert the Bruce got absolutely destroyed by the English. Robert.
Robert the Bruce. That's like Dave the Tom.
Oh,
This is early in Bruce's career when he was still figuring out that maybe fighting conventional battles against the English wasn't the best strategy.
Bruce had just been crowned King of Scotland, and he thought he could take on the English in a straight fight. Spoiler alert, he could not.
The English forces were led by Aymer de Valence. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
his name, Aymer de
yeah.
Valence.
They
And
had
they
curtains on
basically
his face.
scattered the Scottish army. Bruce barely escaped with his life.
But, Lane, here's what I love about this story. This defeat taught Bruce that he needed to fight a guerrilla war instead of traditional battles. Sort of like that's right. They were everywhere, and that's exactly how and that's exactly how he eventually won Scottish independence with guerrillas.
Sometimes you have to lose badly to figure out how to win. Bruce took this humiliation and turned it into a completely different military strategy.
Plus, this is where we get all those legends about Bruce hiding in caves and watching spiders build webs, learning about persistence.
Whether that spider story is true or not, the lesson is real. Bruce went from this crushing defeat to eventually winning at Bannockburn and securing Scotland's independence.
Well, it's a perfect example, Lane, of how failure, and we've had many, can be more instructive than success, as long as you're willing to learn from it.
Yeah. Moving on to June 19th, 2002, Steve Fawcett departed on the first successful solo balloon flight around the world.
Oh, that must have been scary. Where's this thing going to go? Steve Fawcett was basically the human embodiment. That's an interesting way of saying that. The human embodiment of because it's there. The man set over 100 world records just because he could and had nothing better to do.
This balloon flight took him 13 days and covered about 20,000 miles, and he did it alone in a tiny gondola with nothing but the wind to carry him.
Oh, it's so cold up here. What blows my mind, no pun intended, is the precision required. You can't steer a balloon like you can an airplane. You have to find the right winds and different altitudes and ride them like invisible highways in the sky.
Fawcett had tried this 5 times before and failed.
Huh.
Engine problems, weather, equipment failures, basically everything that could go wrong did go wrong until this attempt.
Yeah, in the dictionary, under failure, that's who's there,
Steve
Steve.
Fawcett.
Yes, and it's not like he was just floating around randomly. He had to navigate around restricted airspace. Oop, can't go into Soviet there. Deal with international flight permissions and avoid war zones.
The technology in his gondola was incredible. Satellite communication, weather monitoring, life support systems. It was really like a tiny spacecraft.
And what I love is that this was pure adventure for the sake of adventure. There was no commercial purpose, no scientific breakthrough. Just one guy who wanted to prove it could be done. I mean, he didn't have anything on the side of the balloon that said, Costco.
Yeah. And then ironically, Fawcett disappeared in 2007 while flying a small plane over Nevada. They didn't find the wreckage for over a year. The man lived for adventure and ultimately, adventure got him.
Yes, live by the sword, die by the sword, or balloon, or whatever.
Live by the
June 19th,
balloon, die by the small plane.
June 19th, 1987, Garfield debuted in 41 newspapers, which was the beginning of a comic strip empire.
Garfield. I love that this fat, lazy, lasagna obsessed cat became a global phenomenon. Like, what does that say about humanity, Dave? What does it say?
Well, before him, it was Morris. Remember Morris the cat from
I,
Friskies?
oh, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jim Davis created Garfield specifically to be commercially successful. He studied what comic strips worked and designed Garfield to appeal to the widest possible audience. Everybody
And it
loves
did.
lasagna.
And it worked. At its peak, Garfield was in over 2,500 newspapers worldwide. It became the most widely syndicated comic strip in history.
Yeah, and what's genius about Garfield is that the humor is universal. Everybody understands hating Mondays, loving food, and wanting to sleep all day.
Plus, Garfield never really ages or changes, so the comic has this timeless quality. Kids today can read Garfield strips from 1987, and they're just as funny.
That's right. And although, let's be honest, Garfield without Garfield, where someone removes Garfield from the strips and it's just John talking to himself, is deeply disturbing and somehow funnier than the original.
That says something profound about loneliness in modern life, but I'm not sure what.
Well, we'll get back to that. Maybe some things are better left unanalyzed. Sometimes a cartoon cat who hates Mondays is just a cartoon cat who hates Mondays.
Let's move on to Kuwait independence, which happened in 1961. Kuwait declared independence from the United Kingdom. Huh. Independence from them again?
Yeah.
They really must have owned
They just
everything, right?
can't hang on to anything either.
And ending 62 years as a British protectorate. We're protecting
Kuwait
you. Don't
yeah,
worry, we're just here to protect you.
until we won't. Kuwait's independence story is fascinating because it's all about oil, but also about geopolitics in the Middle East.
The Middle East, is something happening in the Middle East?
No, never.
The British had been protecting Kuwait since 1899, basically to keep the Ottomans and later the Iraqis from taking over. But by 1961, Kuwait was rich enough from oil revenues to stand on its own.
And what's interesting is that Iraq immediately claimed Kuwait belonged to them. Yeah, it's ours, which led to the first major crisis of Kuwait's independence.
Iraq's argument was basically, well, Kuwait used to be part of the Ottoman province of Basra, so it should now be part of Iraq, which is like saying New York should belong to the Netherlands because of New Amsterdam.
Yeah. Well, um, well, what's interesting is that Iraq immediately claimed Kuwait belonged to them. Oh, no, I already said that. The British actually sent troops back to Kuwait just a few days after independence to deter an Iraqi invasion. Well, so much for being independent.
But Kuwait survived, and oil money allowed them to build one of the most prosperous countries in the region, at least until Saddam Hussein decided to invade in 1990.
It's a reminder that small countries with valuable resources often become pawns in larger geopolitical games, whether they want to or not.
Although Kuwait's managed to maintain its independence for over 60 years now, which is pretty impressive given the neighborhood they're in.
Yes. And thanks to us protecting them, they'll have that neighborhood for a while. And finally, June 2005, brings us to one of the most embarrassing moments in Formula One history, the U.S. Grand Prix tire controversy.
Yeah, this was so bad that it almost killed Formula One in America. Only 6 cars started the race because Michelin tires were unsafe on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway banking.
So 14 cars completed the formulation lap, pulled into the pits, and just stayed there. Can you imagine? You pay $100 for tickets, and 70% of the field doesn't even race. Wow.
Yeah, the crowd was furious. People were throwing things, booing, demanding refunds. It was a complete disaster for the sport.
What makes it worse is this could have been avoided. Michelin knew that their tires had problems after practice, but the FIA, the organization which runs the thing, wouldn't let them bring different tires or modify the track.
So you had this standoff where everybody knew the race was going to be a joke, but nobody would compromise to fix it.
And Michael Schumacher won, but it was the most hollow victory in Formula One history. 6 cars, no real competition, and a crowd that desperately wanted their money back.
Yeah, this basically ended Formula One at Indianapolis and damaged the sport's reputation in America for years. It took until recently, really, and for the Formula One to recover in the U.S. market.
It's a perfect example of how bureaucratic stubbornness can destroy something that millions of people love. Sometimes the rules need to bend for common sense.
So there you have it, June 19th, a date that spans from medieval Scottish defeats to modern racing controversies, with emancipation, executions, and the birth of honest advertising in between.
Plus, the first Father's Day, which somehow feels quaint compared to everything else we covered today.
What strikes me about today's date is how many of these events were about people fighting for freedom. Enslaved people in Texas, civil rights activists in the 1960s, even Robert the Bruce trying to free Scotland.
And then you've got Steve Fawcett, who was fighting for the freedom to do completely unnecessary but awesome things with balloons.
Different types of freedom, but the human drive to break free from limitations is a constant thread through history.
Speaking of breaking free from limitations, Randy's Donuts broke free from the limitation of boring bakeries back in 1952, and they've been perfecting the art of donuts ever since.
Smooth transition, Dave. Very smooth.
Well, I try. But seriously, if you want to support the show while supporting your local donut cravings, check out randysdonuts.com.
Thanks for joining us on another journey through the weird and wonderful world of historical coincidences. We'll be back next time with more dates, more stories, and probably more tangents about food.
Until then, I'm Dave.
And I'm Lane, reminding you that history is just people making decisions, and sometimes those decisions involve trademarking triangles.
Or refusing to race cars because of tire politics.
Or creating holidays to honor your dad.
History, it's weirder than you think. Stay tuned for the next one.
Go make some history, people.